Turning to Georgia, where the DA wants to put this RICO trial on in October, which is fast. Trump opposes that. And this clash involves a lot of defendants because that's the whole point of RICO. When it works, you throw the book at everybody together. For that same reason, sometimes RICO can fail. Legally, there are onerous requirements for RICO and getting enough evidence, as the New York Times report notes. RICO cases can just flop when there is strong evidence against the defendant. That doesn't mean you'll get a full group RICO charge. Convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein has many major legal problems, but the effort specifically to convict him on a legal RICO theory failed. Now, the entire burden in this Trump RICO case is, as always, on the prosecutors. And there are valid strategies for the co-defendants here. As one defense lawyer explains in a New York Times piece making the rounds, this is something where there's a question even of whether the DA got it wrong in using RICO. The lawyer also notes that a simpler, more direct approach might lead to a better result. And that brings us to the author of this essay, Atlanta-based criminal defense lawyer Andrew Fleischman. After all of the coverage of the prosecutors and the ex-prosecutors, we want to make sure to understand these coming trials. You have to hear both sides, including the valid defense arguments. With that in mind, we welcome Andrew. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You're looking at this strictly on the law, not on whether coups are a great thing or a good idea. And right. I say that to introduce a very specific legal point you make. Reading from your piece, this specific Georgia solicitation crime has a high bar to prove because you have to ask someone else to commit a felony intentionally. So that means Trump or anyone asking would have to have known what they wanted would violate, for example, the elector's oath of office. Explain why that's a higher bar and how that could benefit defendants.
Well, first off, the oath of office that the general electors and the people of Georgia generally swear is, I will do a good job and I will follow the Constitution. So you have to prove that Donald Trump or those people, when they asked those people to make whatever decision you asked them to make, they knew that would violate the Constitution or would constitute doing a bad job for their constituents. And that's a high bar. If you are trying to prove to me that Donald Trump knows something about the Constitution, you have to go pretty far. So that's for that reason. Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in just to say that's what they call shade, right? It's sort of a diss, but you're saying that could benefit him or other defendants in court. Go ahead.
Yeah, he surrounded himself with crackpots who say, hey, here's how things go, and here's what the Constitution says you can do. And the man himself is no scholar. So if you're trying to prove that he is intentionally doing this, knowing that it doesn't work, that's actually a pretty high bar. And on top of that, you have, he's got this Hawaii precedent. He's had these historical examples he's drawing from, making him think it's okay. It's certainly a lot tougher to prove that than, for instance, that 10,000 dead people didn't really vote in Georgia.
Yep. Let me jump in to say there's been a lot of talk in Washington about whether Trump knew he really lost. The Jan 6 committee had testimony on that. You're making a different legal argument, right? You're saying, regardless of that, the Georgia requirement for someone like, say, Mark Meadows on solicitation would be that he knew what he was asking would violate their oath. And that's a matter of Georgia law, separate from the whole election thing, correct?
Exactly. And the way it's indicted in the indictment is that he had to know that this would violate their oath. So it's pretty clear, even in the charging instrument, that Fani Willis knows she has to prove this. And that strikes me as a really high bar, really hard to meet. And then you have the confusion for the jury. You have a RICO count, and you beat some of the charges that are underlying the RICO count. What do they do with that? That's going to be an instructional nightmare for the judge and a big issue on appeal.
Right. And when you say instructional nightmare, what you're reminding everyone is the jury is people. The people listen to the judge on what to do. When it's simple, like if you saw the murder on tape, if it looked deliberate, you convict. That's easier than what you just alluded to, which is something that could get very complex. I want to read again from your piece. You say it could be difficult for the Fulton County to even grant these parties a speedy trial. And for all the talk of flipping co-defendants, many people here don't have that much exposure. Now, accurately, that's a fair point, considering when we look at the mugshots of all those defendants, there were many people on there who don't personally know or work with Donald Trump. You suggest a simpler case with fewer co-defendants would actually be stronger and have less uncertainty. Explain.
Well, at its heart, this is about like four little conspiracies that have been sort of mushed into one, right? There's the conspiracy to get the fake electors, the conspiracy to get Georgia people to do stuff they don't want to do, conspiracy to go to Coffee County and get that stuff. And each of those together is a pretty straightforward case. It's when you mush them all together that it gets trickier. And then also you have the problem that some of these folks have pretty good defenses, and it's hard how that's going to affect this case. Like these electors, what they're going to testify to is that they didn't expect anyone to believe them when they wrote this down. They know Mike Pence knows who won the election, but their vote is contingent. It's just there just in case somebody wins. And all these charges require their intent to fool somebody. So you've got a RICO case that's relying on all this stuff being proven, and some of it is not going to be proven, and the jury's going to have to deal with that, and the judge is going to have to give an instruction to the jury that accounts for that. Not always easy. In fact, up until 1991...
I'm running over on time because I have Pete Buttigieg here tonight, too. Not saying who's more important. But the final question with 20 seconds is, if some of these Trump co-defendants beat these charges in Georgia, will you be surprised?
No, I would not be surprised if some of these people beat the charges or have charges dismissed because the state can't bring the case in time.
Yeah, really interesting. And again, whether that's news to people, whether people like that legal analysis or not, is not really our concern. You wrote a very interesting, reasoned piece, and I wanted folks to hear it. Andrew Fleischman, thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.